Started. We have a lot to get through today. Welcome everyone to the campaign launch of the My Money Out of MIBA campaign. My name is Anna and I'm a co-founder and organizer with Michigan Divest. And I'm also a steering committee member of the My Money Out of MIBA campaign. So this campaign came together to oppose the use of Michigan public funds to support the Michigan Israel Business Accelerator, or MIBA. Oh, I'm being told people can't hear me. Am I too quiet? Sorry, folks. I'll try to get closer. So maybe you've heard of MIBA, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing about MIBA. So MIBA is a Detroit-based nonprofit which seeks to build business relationships between Michigan and Israel, including in the weapons and defense sector. So we're here because we do not believe Michigan should be using our public funds to subsidize business with Israel as it carries out illegal occupation, maintains a system of racial apartheid, and is actively committing genocide in Palestine. And as you're going to learn today, MIBA has received millions in our public funds, and we're coming together to say no more. So thank you all for joining us tonight as we launch our campaign to demand an end to public funding to the Michigan Israel Business Accelerator. Next slide. So My Money Out of MIBA is the product of several months of collaborative research and partnership between organizers from 4 different organizations. So this includes Michigan Divest, U.S. Palestine Community Network Detroit, Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit, and Engineers Against Apartheid. And tonight you are going to hear from members of each of these organizations. Next slide. So how are we going to be spending our time together this evening? So first, we're just going to do a brief rundown of some brief housekeepings and what our objectives are for tonight. Then we're going to dive into answering the question, what is MIBA? What is the Michigan Israel Business Accelerator? And then we will dive into the 2 targets for this campaign and the strategy associated with each of them. Target 1 being the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, or MEDC. The second being the Michigan Legislature. Then we will talk a little bit about what you can do to take action, including yourself as an individual as well as a organization or group. And then we will spend about the last 20-25 minutes of our session today in a Q&A where you can ask your questions that you might have, because you're going to be receiving a fire hose of information. Next slide. So before we dive in, let's just take a moment, if you feel comfortable, to share in the chat your name, where in the state you are, and if you're here representing any group or organization. Okay. In 1 second, honey. Thank you. Sorry, I got interrupted by my 4-year-old. He's an honorary member of Michigan Divest. So while you're putting your name, organization, city in the chat, I'm just gonna go over a little bit of housekeeping for tonight. So as you've noticed, everyone has been muted. This meeting is being recorded so that we can share it as a resource with folks who couldn't make it tonight, as well as other organizations who couldn't be here tonight. And harassment will not be tolerated in the chat. If that happens, you will be removed from the meeting. And feel free to use the chat throughout this session to ask your questions. Folks from our steering committee will answer your questions as best we can. But then, like I said, we will have a Q&A at the end. So during Q&A, you can use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be unmuted so you can ask your question. Next slide. So what are our objectives for tonight? What do we want to accomplish? So as mentioned, the Michigan Israel Business Accelerator, or MIBA, has received millions of dollars in our public funds, and they're seeking more of it from the MEDC and from our state budget. So our goal is to stop all public funds to this nonprofit. So in this webinar, we are going to explain why MIBA is an important and timely target for ending Michigan's complicity in Israeli occupation and genocide. We'll share our strategy for stopping public funds to MIBA, and then we'll invite all of you to take action alongside us. So with that, I'm going to transition over to our organizers from Engineers Against Apartheid and Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit, who are going to share an overview about what the Michigan Israel Business Accelerator is.
Next slide. Hi, everybody. I'm Talia Gordon. I'm an organizer with Jewish Voice for Peace, and I am based in Detroit. What is MIBA? So as Anna already briefly explained, next slide. The Michigan Israel Business Accelerator is an independent nonprofit organization that facilitates business, investment, and trade relations between Michigan and Israel. It was originally founded in 2007 as the Michigan Israel Business Bridge and then established in its current form as MIBA in 2017. Next slide. So how does MIBA facilitate business and investment between Michigan and Israel? Trade delegations. So in 2023, that delegation included, for example, the chief MDOT officer. In their budget for 2026, MIBA is asking for $75,000 for trade delegations. So this is bringing investors, politicians, bureaucrats, wide range of folks from Michigan to Israel, and then vice versa, bringing folks from Israel to Michigan to facilitate these partnerships, which is part of the matchmaking services that they offer. So connecting Israeli companies with folks in Michigan who can offer them addresses, warehouses, and other means of facilitating business. Also mutual recruitment of individuals and companies, networking events, and the Elevator, which is a free office space and a U.S. mailing address for Israeli companies in downtown Detroit. So, for example, the Elevator's first 3 charter members were Gardnox, which is an Israeli automotive and cybersecurity defense technology and engineering company, which filed for bankruptcy in October 2025. FullPath, a customer data and experience platform for the automotive sector, which was recently acquired by an Atlanta-based conglomerate. So just examples of companies that have been brought and then not brought business. Not that we would be happy if they were, but they're also not doing what they say they're going to do. And SkillReal, which offers augmented reality measurement capabilities on screen. So these are all kind of examples of various tech companies that are, facilitating weapons operations. Next slide. So, as noted, MIBA routinely collaborates with, supports, and advocates for Israeli corporations, institutions, and individuals complicit in apartheid and genocide, including, next slide, probably well known to most of you on this call, Elbit Systems. Elbit Systems is Israel's largest private weapons manufacturer. It's been a priority BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions target for a long time. Was one of the primary suppliers of weapons and surveillance systems to the Israeli military. So Elbit made MPR 500 multi-purpose bombs are being used by Israel, have been used and are currently being used by Israel in its attacks. So and MIBA takes credit for helping Elbit and other companies open offices in Michigan. So like a primary facilitator of Elbit's foothold in the Michigan economy and landscape. Next slide. this is a quote from Jonathan Hulati, Business Development North America of Elbit Systems, talking about how MIBA has facilitated this relationship. So, all their networking and all their support. Next slide. Another example of MIBA's facilitation of, individuals complicit in genocide is the relationship with Mark Regev. Mark Regev is the former ambassador of Israel to the United Kingdom and was Netanyahu's senior advisor for foreign affairs and international communications. In 2024, Regev was charged with advocating genocide under Australian law. And next slide. MIBA recently hosted an educational program which featured, they quote, distinguished speakers Mark Davidoff and Mark Regev, who was, recently charged with advocating for genocide. So again, and this is all from MIBA's public-facing website. This is what they advertise to the public about what they're doing with public funds. And finally, next slide. Another example of complicity. MIBA directly supports the Israel Ministry of Defense. This is a recent Facebook post where MIBA is celebrating an event convening with the Israel Ministry of Defense, during which weapons companies were cutting multi-million-dollar contracts. And this is an example of one of the groups that was being supported. Next slide, and I'll pass it over to Rita.
Hi everyone, my name is Rita. I'm from Engineers Against Apartheid, and I want to kind of situate MIBA for us as Michiganders and what this means for like the average person. So a lot of Michigan is intertwined with engineering and manufacturing. We have like the center and the heart of the automotive industry. And a lot of us have seen various changes, especially in recent time, being deeply affecting towards like the workforce. So one of those things is automation and how thousands of manufacturing jobs in Michigan have been depleted over time. The militarization of companies is another pattern that works into changes that are occurring against the workforce as well. A lot of people are concerned with this changing involvement of their work and their labor that's now being funneled towards international war crimes. A few weeks ago, Reuters had an article that the Pentagon was suggesting to GM and Ford to start leaning more towards making weapons. And these weapons are not being used for us or for domestic defense or anything. They're being shipped away to foreign wars, which is really concerning. And then to tie in MIBA to all of this, it's a project that claims to invigorate our economy, yet it created 13 jobs in 2023, and in 2025 it projected 30 jobs. Those figures are pretty negligible when it comes to any type of economic support that it's claiming to give to the working people. So even in complete isolation, MIBA is not of economic benefit to Michigan at all. It is simply something to support Israel. Next slide, please. And then just in general, even outside of, our classic industries, just everyday Michiganders, MIBA's success is going to disrupt our daily lives because it's bolstering these connections with Israeli businesses and technologies, which diverts attention away from local businesses and technologies and local interests, and is directly taking limited funds away from things that could be serving the Michigan public. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to bring up these examples as a tangible sort of change that's happening in our state that is in line with this trend of funding projects like MIBA. So there was a McGraw-Hill manufacturing plant in Grand Rapids, and that plant was bought out by Plasan, which sends military vehicles to Israel. And in Imlay Township, a Champion bus manufacturing company, which also creates buses that are designed for disability accommodations, that a facility was bought out by Veptos, which retrofits vehicles for military use, again, in places like Israel and Ukraine that are not related at all to American and Michigander public consumer use or anything of benefit to the American people and to Michigan workers. And I'll hand it back over to JVP.
Great. Next slide, please. My name is Bridget Bile, sharing a seat here with Talia, also with JVP Detroit, and in Michigan. So, I mean, one of the first things that we always do when we're targeting a new organization or corporation or lawmaker is look at who they're in relationship with, who are the actual people that are trying to make Michigan the engine of Israel's war economy, and what are the organizations that they're affiliated with. They have 19 board members. They represent a bunch of weapons industry manufacturers, as well as the Detroit Economic Club, Detroit Regional Partnership. The Detroit Regional Partnership has partnered with MIBA on some initiatives. And then we have sort of a slew of your local major employers and major philanthropists in the region. This is really typical to see if you're going after anything from DTE Energy to any other big corporation locally. An important finding when we looked at the board members is that there's a direct link between MIBA board members and who is providing the flow of funds from MEDC. So Alyssa Tracy is a MIBA board member, and she's the director of international trade at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and pretty key person here. Quentin Messer is the CEO of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. He has been held accountable in the past for other issues with MEDC funding, and he's also a board member of MIBA. And with that, I will pass it off to Matt, I think.
Clark with Michigan Invest. I live in Metro Detroit. Where does MIBA get the majority of its funds? Where does MIBA get its funds? We've actually obtained some pretty detailed information through MIBA, and we'll get to that in a second. But in 2025, the majority of their funds actually came from the government, from the state government, from our public money. You see from this chart, and these are MIBA's own numbers, $900,000 out of the 1.3 million that they've received came from the government. And in that case, it's through MEDC, although now they're seeking funding from other parts of government, which we'll get into later. You see foundations and corporations and private donations also make up some part of it, but primarily it's it's the state government, which is of course who we are targeting to cease our public funding of Michigan Institute of Business Accelerator. You can go to the next slide. And this is MIBA in their own words. Next slide, please. Perhaps, well, as Bridget mentioned, there are a couple MIBA executive board members who also sit in high-level positions in the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. There are many bad things about that, but perhaps the one good thing is their emails are public record. So we've obtained through the Freedom of Information Act some of MIBA's internal meeting notes, executive board meetings, annual strategy meeting notes, where they talk about what they're all about and their plans for 2026. So this is some of the things that MIBA is actually directly saying. I'm quoting here, their goal for 2026, one of their main goals is to leverage MIBA's role in defining Michigan economic upside in the Middle East potential New World Order. So to most people, genocide, endless war, toppling of governments, bombing civilians and killing children, that's some of the worst crimes imaginable. But to weapons manufacturers, that's an opportunity they see the economic upside in that kind of thing, and that's their own words. So to MIBA and the weapons industry, they want to capitalize on that. They want to profit from these sort of horrible things that are going on in Palestine and in the region. One of their other quotes from their strategy meeting and their board meetings: with Capture Systems, Rafael, and Elbit, those are all weapons companies, which we'll get into them a little bit more later on. With Capture Systems, Rafael, and Elbit opening U.S. offices in Southeast Michigan in 2025 and growing engagements with Maris Tech, Spear, UAV, R2 Wireless, and more, the region is rapidly becoming a hub for Israeli defense technology. Their goal is to turn Southeast Michigan in particular into a hub for the Israeli weapons industry. And they take credit, those three bolded names, Capture Systems, Rafael, and Elbit. MIBA takes credit for helping them open offices in Southeast Michigan. So that's what they're up to. Next slide. Some of the other quotes, in addition to them sort of getting a foothold in the weapons industry, they've been quite well, I wouldn't say transparent. I mean, this is what they're talking about, and we found it through public records. Their goal is to, quote, drive the MIBA brand into the C-suite and the halls of government, quote, focus on government relations, including MEDC, the legislature, and the candidates for governor. They hired a public relations firm called PAA, which is Public Affairs Associates, and they note, quote, PAA has secured several connections with legislators and identified state support. As Chris and Dalal will get into later, they are seeking legislative funding, and we believe that they took this route because MEDC is some of their funding is being cut. So basically, they want to seek other sources of government funding. And one of their other quotes, quote, engagement with PAA reflects a long-term strategy preparing for the next administration. They're talking about the governor, where relationships built now will be critical. So they are lobbying. They're lobbying the halls of power, the C-suite, and the halls of government. And they do take credit, actually. The Michigan Office of Defense and Aerospace Innovation and Strategic Plan, which is put through by the state of Michigan, they specifically thanks MIBA for its input in helping develop their sort of plan for connecting and ramping up the weapons industry in our state. And they're going to do it with public funds. That's what they want to do. Next slide. Some of the other kind of maybe a zanier thing that we found here is that they are, quote, advancing efforts to secure a direct Delta flight from DTW to Tel Aviv. So they want to make it so you can fly straight from Tel Aviv to Detroit. I don't know what sort of connections they have to try to make that happen, but it's interesting that they're trying to do it. They will also, quote, want to be loud and proud of all we do and drive enhanced visibility for MIBA. Perhaps the only thing we agree with them on is our campaign is working to drive enhanced visibility for them, not in the way that they would prefer. You can go to the next slide. So that brings us to our first target for divestment, which is the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC. You can go to the next slide. What is the MEDC? So the Economic Development Corporation, it's a quasi-governmental entity. It's a public-private partnership, and its goal is to encourage economic development in Michigan by awarding grants to business projects. It's publicly funded with our public funds, and as a government entity, we need to keep this in mind the whole time. It exists to serve the public. It's important as a government entity that's a key difference for us because we can obtain information through public records requests that we couldn't otherwise do. MEDC structure, as JVP had mentioned earlier, there's 20 members in their executive committee. They're appointed by the governor, largely local politicians and private industry executives. As Bridget had mentioned, Quentin Messer Jr. is the MEDC CEO. He also serves on the chair of Michigan Strategic Fund, which is a formation within MEDC. We'll talk a bit more about. And of course, it bears repeating, he is on the executive board for MIBA. So wears a couple hats here. You can go to the next slide. MEDC, I think Anna mentioned, has awarded MIBA over $6 million in public funding since 2018. Sometimes that funding is through the Michigan Strategic Fund, which is within MEDC, and sometimes it's not. If it goes through the Strategic Fund, it has to be approved by a board, but the Strategic Fund board. But other types of funding through MEDC do not require board approval. It's kind of important for our purposes because it's going to be really key for us to determine who the decision makers are here, to get an audience with them. In February 2026, MIBA executed its latest contract, a $650,000 contract to fund MIBA for all of this year, granted through MEDC's International Trade Program. And as we had mentioned earlier, the head of the International Trade Program is Alyssa Tracy, who is on the board of MIBA. So MIBA is deciding to give MIBA money through our public dollars. This grant is paid in installments throughout the year. That's important because one of our goals is to try to end their contract so we can end it before certain installments are made. You can go to the next slide. is an example of how MIBA works. It's sort of a concrete and infuriating example how MIBA funnels Michigan public money into the Israeli weapons industry. So Capture Systems, we had mentioned before, is an Israeli weapons manufacturer that throughout 2024 and 25, with MIBA and MEDC's help, secured over $3 million in our public funds to open an office in Michigan. It breaks down just about $1 million from the MEDC through the Business Development Grant Program, $1.2 million from another program, the New Jobs Training Program, and then $900,000 through Michigan Work Support Grant. So those are from different sources of state government, but MIBA through its connections, we demonstrated earlier has deep connections in the state government. It's trying to build those connections. Of course, it sits on the board of MEDC, so that's certainly a connection. I don't know if you call it a connection. It's the same thing. The Venn diagram overlaps between those two entities. So it shouldn't be surprising that nearly $1 million in MEDC public funds went to Capture Systems Israeli weapons industry. Another interesting Israeli weapons company that was funded is Israel Aerospace Industries, which actually is Israel. It is a fully Israeli government-owned weapons manufacturer, and it's of course the part of Israel that makes weapons. And very recently, Israel Aerospace Industries was obtained a manufacturing agreement in the state of Michigan through MIBA's help, and they proudly tout that as one of their accomplishments. You can go to the next slide. Which brings us a bit to our strategy. In regards to MEDC, we have two very concrete and obtainable demands. Number one, MEDC must reject any future funding requests from MIBA. Typically, the way that these grants work is every year they're granted a different, they're granted a separate grant. And that comes to different places in MEDC. But they need to stop. They should reject any funding starting in 2027 and going forward. Our money, of course, should help Michigan, not contribute to genocide in Palestine, not be used to fund Israeli weapons. And one of the things we're going to continue to do is monitor MIBA's applications for further MEDC funding. We've looked through prior years, and typically they submit their grant requests between July and September. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. There's a bit of a delay between when they're awarded their contract and then when the grant itself is executed. So we'll be keeping a close eye on those steps and try to influence that process. The second goal here is to end MIBA's current grant contract, as I mentioned, is paid in installments throughout the year. So we can stop it. Not only we can stop it, but MEDC has the power under Section 9B of their grant agreement to unilaterally terminate that grant. And so that's one of the things that we demand that they do. You can go to the next slide. A few other facets of our strategy. As I mentioned, public records is a really important part of this. We've learned a great deal through our public records request. We have another big Freedom of Information Act response that is on the way. We had to pay about $300, but it should be coming fairly soon. It's going to help us learn a lot about MEDC's sort of internal structure and their decision making. We did also submit a Freedom of Information Act request for the emails. When you have board members of MIBA who also are board members of MEDC or high-level people in MEDC, and they use their state government emails to conduct MIBA business, and we ask for it, they have to give it to us. So it's interesting, they've decided that it's going to cost a lot of money. They say they have to do a lot of work to get us those emails. So they're glad to give us those emails. They're going to charge us $10,000. They initially wanted to charge $12,000. We had to sort of submit a FOIA appeal because about $2,000 of that was for paper production costs. And I pointed out, well, we've done FOIAs with MEDC before, and they actually just give it to us electronically. So there's not really any of that. And they said, okay, well, fair enough. We'll knock down $2,000. So it's only going to be $10,000. We're trying to figure out what to do with that. But I think it's interesting to make the point, we had asked for certain keyword searches in basically 2 email boxes. If somebody had asked me for that, I could probably pull it up in, I don't know, 20 minutes. but they're saying it's gonna take over 200 hours of work, and they want to charge us $10,000 for it. So we're very interested what is in those emails, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. Another facet of our strategy is the inside-outside strategy. We want to make inroads with MEDC because there are parts of MEDC that we don't think are ever going to agree with our outlook and our demands. However, MEDC is not monolithic. It's a pretty big organization. It has a lot of interest, and it exists to serve the public. So we would like to open discussion with them. As a precedent, sort of, Michigan Divest, when we targeted Israel bonds held by the state retirement system, we that was a very important part of our strategy is to have an open channel of dialogue with the state retirement system decision makers, both to learn about their decision making, to get to know them, and just to sort of see how they're feeling about this. So that is something that we're going to continue to try to do, is make inroads here. But of course, mass mobilization, anything with Palestine solidarity and Palestine activism is really the key to this whole thing. And we've seen, I mean, the people more than ever support Palestine. People don't want their public funds to go to these horrible things. There's so many better things that our funds can go to help Michiganders, and not to kill people and cause death and destruction in Palestine. So it's really important that we speak out at their MEDC meetings. We'll be talking a bit more about that later. And then, of course, you can sign and circulate the petition. You can go to the next slide. Pass it to Chris and Delilah.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I'm Chris Root. I'm also with Michigan Divest, and I'm also with the Palestine Interfaith Network in the Lansing area. You can tell from the webinar so far that a tremendous amount of research has been going on for a long time by people involved in this campaign in what is MIBA, which is where we started, and then what is MEDC, and what are the connections between MEDC and MIBA. That was what we thought the focus of our campaign was going to be, and that is what Matt just described, with MEDC being target number one. Matt also shared information that he just learned this week. So we all just learned it this week, that MIBA had a strategic planning meeting for 2026 at which they decided to focus more on the legislature and the governor's race in addition to MEDC. So this target number 2 of the Michigan legislature is very new. And we didn't know about it whenever it was they had that strategic planning meeting, but we've learned about evidence of it just recently. When in February, Representative Joseph Aragona from Macomb County, the area of Southeast Michigan that we're talking about being the focus for MIBA, requested that $1 million be included in the Michigan state budget to go to MIBA, which is quite a remarkable idea when you think about what is the Michigan budget for. It is for all the needs of Michigan residents, and $1 million for MIBA. That's what they're trying to accomplish. So we found out about this in mid-March, just about a month after the request happened. We learned about it because an ally of ours in the legislature said the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor and Economic Opportunity is holding a hearing in 2 days with to hear about a dozen requests for money in the budget. And one of them is from MIBA. And we were stunned. So we had literally less than 48 hours to write a draft letter of opposition, to send it out to probably a dozen WhatsApp and Signal groups and say, send messages of opposition to this House subcommittee. And when the hearing happened, I can quote to you what the chair of the subcommittee said after Representative Aragona and the MIBA director had their 8 minutes to present the $1 million request. She said, "I do have to read this into the record. We have received a large volume of electronically submitted letters in opposition to this project. Those submissions will be made available with the testimony materials from today's meeting online at the House Fiscal Agency's website." So the following week, we went to the website and found 230 emails opposing this $1 million grant request for MIBA. I think that was a pretty good way for us to start our campaign against this second target, which is asking for money from the legislature. So let's go to the next. Yeah, good. This is the next slide. The $1 million request is what's called a legislatively directed spending item, or LDSI. That expression didn't even exist until last year. It used to just be called an earmark or pork. The fact that it has to be revealed at all, happened because of a law passed last year, which was actually introduced by Sarah Anthony, who's the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, so that if earmarks are going to be in the budget, a request for that has to be made public at least 45 days before the bill is passed. So the public gets this tiny opportunity to find out that somebody is advocating for this money. We then found out in April that a senator, Roger Victory, has also requested this $1 million for MIBA. So the MIBA now has some advocate in both the House and the Senate for this $1 million of money. Let's go to the next slide. So we needed to learn how are decisions made about Michigan's budget, how are decisions made specifically about these LDSIs, of which there are hundreds, and how can we try to keep $1 million for MIBA out of the budget? There are now 3 versions of the budget for the year that starts October 1 coming up. One from the governor that happened in February. Then the House of Representatives passed a version April 22nd. The Senate passed a version April 29th. The House bill is basically a Republican version of the budget. The Senate bill is basically a Democratic version of the budget. They are very far apart, very, very far apart. And they just get passed as sort of the starting points for negotiations, since you've got the Senate under control of the Democrats and the House under the control of the Republicans. One example of how far apart they are is that they are $12 billion different in amount. And there are just differences throughout about how the money should be spent. So there are big differences before you even get to what to do about these hundreds of requests for earmarks or LDSIs. So when people are doing legislative work, we usually think, well, we need to get a majority of the members to vote the way that we're advocating. So we're going to, do lobbying. We're going to figure out, who has influence, and then we'll try to figure out how to get a majority of the votes. That is not what happens on the budget in terms of individual parts of the budget. The budget is the most important thing the legislature does. It also is the least transparent thing that the legislature does. So once we've got these initial bills, which were finished last week, then the next step is going into closed-door negotiations involving the Senate leaders and the House leaders and the governor's office. And basically, however long it takes for those folks to come up with some agreement, there won't one final bill that comes from that process is what will be voted on by all the members of the House and all the members of the Senate. The chance, and so part of that process is deciding which of these LDSIs to include, in addition to all the huge differences that there are in the major parts of the budget. So there's no possibility that a final vote when they bring one bill before the House and the Senate is going to be decided by whether or not there's $1 million for MIBA. It really is going to be decided in negotiations. So how long are those negotiations likely to take? There's probably a betting market, to predict this question. I haven't looked into that, but we don't know. Nobody knows. It could be a month from now. It could be 4 months from now. So we have to be working now in case it goes faster than people expect. And we have to have the stamina to keep going for however long it takes to get to a final negotiated version of the one budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Dalal to talk about our strategy for trying to influence what is going to go on in secret to decide the final budget and whether that $1 million for MIBA is going to be in it in the end.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Mhm.
Okay, good evening, everyone. 1 second. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dalal, and I'm a Palestinian American, and I'm an organizer with USPCN, the U.S. Palestinian Community Network, and also I'm also an organizer with Michigan Coalition Against Genocide, and I'm here in Dearborn, Michigan. So I'm going to be talking about the part that I'm going to be speaking about is the Michigan legislative strategy that we have, and how this directly connects to you as Michigan taxpayers. So our legislative strategy is focusing on a few key areas. So first, we're continuing our efforts to develop relationships with the allies and the legislator, while also building public pressure through our petition and letter writing initiative. And during the month of May, we're going to be, first of all, of course, sending opposition emails to the Senate Leo subcommittee that Chris talked about. This is to ensure that the legislators know that they're hearing directly from their constituents about our opposition to this $1 million of our public city and county tax funds that they want to just disperse to take away from our cities, our communities, our children, our healthcare, and they want to give that to the Michigan Israeli Business Accelerator. So we want to be clear that to our legislators that we want them to know that we want our tax dollars to be used here in our cities and our communities. We need it for many, many, many things other than bringing more Israeli defense and tech companies that are directly complicit with apartheid and genocide. Our next strategy is by July 1st. I know some of you in this webinar have already signed it, and some of you who haven't, we're going to ask you to please sign our petition. We're trying to collect at least 2,000 petition signatures to present to them. This will help us just clearly demonstrate it's a visible opposition as Michigan residents to this MIBA funding, both for the LDSI $1 million that's coming out of our city and county, and also it's to show opposition towards MEDC using public funds to continually fund MIBA. At the same time, we're also working on building relationships with allies, as Chris had mentioned. We're continually working to make those relationships stronger with allies and legislator, which is also going to be critical in the long term. Also, we are going to continue, as Chris said, through June and July, or as Chris said, who knows, right? Who knows when it's going to be finalized, the final budget will be passed. But until it's been finalized and passed, we're going to keep pushing and securing commitments from the Senate and House Democratic leaderships, specifically asking them to not include the $1 million LDSI for MIBA in their budget. This is the most important window that we have from now until that is officially passed. Because once that budget is finalized, the decisions are locked in, we kind of lose our opportunity to get it removed from the budget. So right now, this is a huge component in our strategy is we have time, but we don't know how much time. So we will continually push the petitions and the letter writing campaign and working with, building our strategy with allies. And also those that are not necessarily allies will be building, having direct communication with them consistently because our position is very simple and it's very clear, and it actually aligns with what the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So it aligns with exactly what Sarah Anthony, the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, had said. She recently said that the state budget is a statement of our values. And also Mary Kavanaugh, who's chair of the Senate Leo subcommittee, also said that our budget truly puts the people of Michigan first the way it should be. And we are echoing the same thing. We agree with them. So it doesn't matter if we are in agreement of what Israel or tech companies or defense companies that are related to Israel are, that's irrelevant. What we agree on is that the state budget is a statement of our values, and we should put the people of Michigan first. And this is what we will be focusing on with our legislators, because the question is, are you going to put Michigan taxpayers first with the funding decisions? That's a question to them, because we believe taxpayer money should be invested in Michigan economy, education, communities, public service, not in MIBA. So, and to put this all in perspective, let's look at the next slide and look at what $1 million could do in Michigan and how it could be better used to benefit Michiganders. So $1 million, instead of going to MIBA, it could be used to support Michigan's, and these, by the way, are all current LDSIs that are being requested by communities and cities in Michigan. So these aren't fictitious examples. These are real life examples right now. They're asking the state of Michigan, our legislator appropriations committee, to approve these into the budget. So instead of using $1 million from MIBA, they should be supporting the LDSIs that help and benefit Michiganders, such as support Michigan's Autism Navigator program, which helps families access critical services. Another LDSI that could benefit from this $1 million is helping Brilliant Detroit expand their comprehensive place-based literacy programs for children. Also improving education access and career services for youth with experience in foster care. They could use that $1 million badly. Also, many of our cities, I just put the city of Romulus, but there's several cities that are in dire need of funding a new fire truck to enhance emergency responses. And the city of Romulus is just one that I listed, but there are quite a few cities that are hurting with very old equipment, and that should be a top priority, not MIBA. So this is the message that we're sending, part of our strategy with legislators. These are real local investments that will directly benefit Michigan residents. In the end, this comes down to priorities, right? It's Michigan's budget reflects what we value as a state and within our communities. And how we choose to invest our taxpayer dollars is critical. And our tax dollars need to be used to strengthen our Michigan communities and not be spent on helping bring more Israeli defense and tech companies here. And that is a message I'm sure we all echo on this call, and that is a message that is a strategy and a big push that we'll be sending to legislators through one-on-one meetings and through our letter writing initiative and through the petitions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Anna. Anna is going to walk you through the next steps for how to take action.
Thank you, Dalal. Next slide. Oh, wait. I think, Dalal, you had something here.
Oh, yes. Let me just
Yeah.
go back to that real quick. Thank you. So this is just really quick. This is a prototype. It's a searchable map for you to see. We're going to try to add this into a website that we're creating that will be in our future website that you can go on there. It should be interactive. And it's a map of alternative LDSI requests that might be funded instead of MIBA. So this is, once we can get this out to you guys, or you might even be able to Google it if it's out there. But if not, we'll definitely be putting that in our website and to stay tuned for that. And it's a great resource and a great resource for you to keep tabs of to see what's happening with our tax dollars. All right. Thanks, Anna. Back to you.
Thanks, Dalal.
You're welcome.
Also, thank you to Mohammed from Michigan Divest, who's developing this GIS map where you can see what proposals for LDSI appropriation funds are in your area. Okay, so this is a lot of information, and you're probably wanting to know, what can I do to take action right now? So we're going to dive into some different things that individuals as well as organizations can do to take action alongside us. So next slide. First of all, if you haven't already, sign the petition. So this is an Action Network petition. I saw that someone in the chat asked, like, is this electronic or is this paper? We're doing both. You might have seen us tabling at No Kings, for example, and we had paper versions of this petition. So there's an opportunity to sign either way. Certainly we prefer if you can direct people to the digital petition form. So share the petition with friends, with your community. If you're part of an organization, share it with your members and networks or other coalitions that you're a part of. When you sign the petition on Action Network, there's a little checkbox where you can sign up for updates so you can get more frequent updates about where the campaign is at. And I think, can someone put that? Oh, someone just put it in the chat. Thank you, Talia. So please sign the petition and share it widely. Next slide. The next thing that folks can do is write to the Michigan Senate Subcommittee on Labor and Economic Opportunity, the LEO subcommittee, telling them to reject MIBA's proposal for $1 million from our state budget. You'll be sending your letters to the committee clerk for this subcommittee. His name is Corey Savino. And we have a letter template that you can use as is or adapt to send your own message to the subcommittee. And like Dalal had mentioned, we're sending letters really from now until the end of May. So the letter writing template, let me put that in the chat so that you can access that. And feel free to, just adapt it to whatever you want to say to the subcommittee. And if you know that there is an LDSI that you really want supported in your own community, make sure to mention that in your letter. Next slide. Another way you can take action is to attend the next MEDC Executive Committee meeting. So we need to tell the MEDC Executive Committee to end MIBA's current $650,000 grant and to reject future funding requests from MIBA for the foreseeable future. The meeting schedule is in the little red box on the right here. So you'll see the upcoming meeting is May 12th, and these start at 10 a.m. And they are here in Lansing. You can attend and give public comment in person, or you can also attend virtually. Obviously, if you're not from Lansing, it might be a drive for you, but certainly being in person sends a message. We made a note here about those who want to attend virtually. There's some parameters that MEDC has around giving public comment virtually. So you have to pre-register by 3 p.m. the day prior to the meeting. So if you want to give public comment virtually, you need to register on May 11th, the day before. There is a link here at the bottom, and I'll also put it in the chat, where you can see all the meeting information for the executive committee, as well as how to sign up for public comment virtually. I'll put in the chat. So when you click that link, you're going to get to their homepage, which you're just going to see a bunch of their photos, all the individuals on the executive committee. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and that's where you see where the public comment is. They like to hide it, so keep that link handy. Next slide. The other thing that you can do is spread awareness. You can share information with your community about the campaign, share it far and wide. So along with the petition in our link tree, which I'll also put that in the chat, you'll find links to everything that we've shared today. All the links that we've put in the chat are housed in there in one kind of convenient spot. And you'll also find some downloadable, printable, and shareable campaign materials, flyers. When we have talking points, those will be in there. Another great way to stay aware is to follow the partner organizations that are part of the steering committee here. So follow Michigan Divest, USPCN Detroit, Engineers Against Apartheid, and Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit, to get frequent updates about the campaign. I'm going to put the link tree in the chat for the campaign. So there you'll see all of the links that you've seen on the screen here. And we'll also be updating this with a recording of this meeting, as well as a copy of these slides, so that you can come back to this material after this webinar. Next slide. So if you're part of a group or organization, there's also things that you can do as part of a larger group. One being endorse the demands. So sign the petition on behalf of your organization to be included as an organizational endorser of the campaign. So when you fill out the form, there's a question that asks if you're signing on behalf of an organization, and then you just give like the email associated with your organization. So your group will be up to date on what's happening. You can also invite the My Money Out of MIBA campaign to speak or train with your organization, that organization's members, on how to talk about the campaign in your community, how to gather petitions. So like I mentioned, we do have paper petitions. We can train you on how to gather those, how to mobilize your community to take or participate in some of these action steps to pressure the MEDC and our legislators. So our email is here, mymoneyoutofmiba@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to us, we'd be more than happy to have a one-on-one with your organization to talk more in depth about what your organization can do to advance the campaign in your community. With that, I'm going to transition it over to Matt, who's going to share a little bit more about kind of more broadly what organizations can do to help build the coalition in Michigan and beyond.
Thanks, Anna. You can go to the next slide, Sina. There are really an endless array of creative possibilities that we can think about as to how this issue affects your community. You saw in that map all of those red dots. I'm sure that there's some red dots close to you, which are LDSI recipients for typically very worthy causes that are competing with the Israeli war machine for funding. So the creative possibilities are endless to mobilize your community on that issue. Some other particular ideas, Macomb County in particular partners with MIBA. It's one of the most populous counties in our state. Later this month, the county is holding an annual Michigan Defense Expo that MIBA is going to be at. So particularly people in that area, we would love to connect with you and think about ways that we can work together. MIBA also partners and works with many universities, Michigan State, the co-chair of what's called the Green and White Council, which is a high-level position run out of the office of president of that university. His name is Matt Elliott, is the co-chair, is also the chair of MIBA. So students who support Palestine, we want to talk with you. U of M as well, there's something called Perot Jane Tech Lab, the Center for Entrepreneurship that has partnered with MIBA in the past, as well as Oakley University has done similar things. And much of MEDC's funding comes from tribal revenue. So we're thinking about ways to engage with the indigenous tribes in Michigan to think about speaking out of how their public funds are used and whether they should be used to fund something like this. And we really also want to think about this issue in the context of a national movement. It's worth noting MIBA in their meeting notes that we obtained, they're thinking about later this year getting together a council of the 15 or so other state-based Israel Economic Development organizations to sort of think and strategize together. They have a national movement, and we need our own national movement. In Michigan Divest, we were part of the national Israel Bonds divestment movement. We learned so much and were inspired so much by what people were doing in other parts of the country. And I think this issue is a very underutilized aspect of divestment that we hope to develop on a national level. I know there's some people in Maryland who are working on this issue, but there's many other states as well. MIBA just also became what's called the Bird Foundation representative. That's the Israel United States Binational Industrial Research and Development Foundation. That's a mouthful, but basically they get funds through this nationwide foundation to partner Israeli businesses with Michigan businesses. So this issue is a bigger national issue, and we hope to sort of think about it in that context. So with that, I believe we are on to the Q&A. I have that right? How are we going to do this? Yeah, Anna, okay.
Yeah. So that was a lot of information. Some folks have had questions in the chat. We've tried to answer them the best we can. So we want to use the rest of our time today or this evening to talk about what questions you have. As you've heard all this information, you can also put your questions in the chat if you don't want to use your voice. If you want to ask a question, you can use the raise hand function, and then Zaina will unmute you. And then maybe, Zaina, if it makes sense for, maybe if we unmute all of the steering members so we could all just kind of chime in and answer, if that makes sense.
Yes, that sounds good.
Thanks. And I see Daniel, you have a question. So we'll have, there we go.
Okay, yeah. So I had two questions. One was the best approach or sort of strategy for folks in Michigan to approach their local state rep and state senator, and in like what we should ask them to do. Then the other one was approaching candidates. If if you could ask them if there's any kind of approach, maybe we could develop a strategy for approaching candidates that they could take a stand on money out of MIBA. So those are two questions.
We could take some questions too if they haven't been answered in the chat as well.
Dalal, do you want to reply to Daniel's question?
No, go ahead. I'm just
Okay.
letting you know that there's also questions in the chat.
Okay. So Daniel was asking how do we talk to our own state reps or state senators, presumably. We do not have a plan to try to contact everybody in the legislature, or even everybody in the legislature who could remotely possibly be helpful. What we're trying to do is find people who have connections to basically the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate. We're trying to find out who can effectively talk to the people who are going to be in the closed door sessions negotiating on the budget. So we're talking about who can talk in the legislature, from the legislature, who can talk with Sarah Anthony, the head of appropriations, with Joe Tate, who's in the House and is the minority vice chair of appropriations, with Winnie Brinks, who's the majority leader of the Senate. These are people who are going to be involved in deciding what's in the budget. And if there are folks who can get entry to those people, who have access to those people, who agree with us that MIBA shouldn't be in the budget, that the budget should be used for many, many important things for Michiganders instead. That's what we're seeking. We aren't trying to rack up, communications with everybody in the legislature because, frankly, everybody doesn't have a role. Candidates, we have not started to think about the governor's race. We only learned about that focus from MIBA a couple of days ago. So we haven't really thought about it yet. There may be some candidates for state and House seats who are interested in raising the issue, or who, it might be helpful to add some visibility to the issue. You have to kind of think strategically about it. We don't want to create lots of disagreement about MIBA all over the place that we can't really manage. So we're really thinking about who has influence with the key leaders who are going to decide what goes in that negotiated budget. And the other thing, we're trying to double the number of people who sign the petition in the next month. So there's plenty of work to do on that front that can be done everywhere in the state. Thanks.
And just to add to your point, you said, what Chris said is what makes it even more difficult and more maddening is it isn't like the legislators on that appropriations committee are going to, as we discovered, they don't vote individually for these LDSIs. They don't vote one by one and say, yes, let's include this. No, let's get this out. They kind of just sneak things into the overall budget, and then they negotiate back and forth. And that's what makes it, that's why it's very important, like Chris said, to target the key leaders.
Okay, next on the screen, I see Jack.
Yes, thanks. Wonderful presentation, great preparation. I learned a great deal. Thank you all. My question is about contacting the LEO subcommittee. Is the planning group confident that if we write to the clerk, the messages will get through to the members of the subcommittee?
That is the way it functioned with the House subcommittee on LEO. those went into the record. Certainly you could send the email directly to all members of the LEO, but the clerk's role is to make sure to administer all those letters to the members of the subcommittee. Fabrice.
Hey, thanks. So maybe not directly related to your current plans, but just sort of other potential directions here. There's the Office of Mobility that me as an environmentalist, I was, very supportive of their direction to push EVs, et cetera, but they've moved now into like drones. And drones are kind of the future of autonomous AI-based warfare in Iran and other places. So potentially, target that agency of the Michigan state government and try to, divest them of any drone production that relates to Israeli companies. The other thing is you did talk about Palestine and the genocide, but what about Iran? It seems to me Iran is a very unpopular war. And to the extent that Israel's prosecuting that war with funding from the Michigan state government, that could help bring support for our efforts.
Thanks, Fabrice. I can talk a little bit to those very, very good points. One of the supporters of MIBA is what's called the Michigan Mobility Institute. We've had to think a lot about where to begin with this project because it's so expansive. One of our modes of thinking was to track individual grants, which we've done for a few of them. And in fact, one of them being a drone program that was funding for a drone program that was administered through MEDC. It's very hard to do that. But for example, like when we saw capture systems, which is involved in the drone industry, we found that it's extremely difficult to track all these individual grants. Some of them come from MEDC, some of them come from elsewhere. MIBA actually advertises a huge array of grants that are available, and they encourage their partner companies to apply for them. And we thought about getting in the way of that process and intervening in that process because we did it as a test run for a few programs just to see who the applicants were and that kind of thing. If we had unlimited resources, that would be an amazing thing to do because we've been thinking in those terms. MIBA is kind of a keystone in this sort of infrastructure because it really helps facilitate this. So we've had to think narrowly about that. But if you know about that industry in particular, it sounds like you'd be a great resource for us to talk to about thinking more about that issue.
Next I see Donald.
Hi, I've asked a couple of questions in the chat, and I just asked them now, I guess. I don't know if people have heard of Christopher Armitage. I've just recently become acquainted with him in his book Toppling Tyrants. And he is very practical and has an approach that I think we need to probably adopt in this campaign, which is on two fronts, not only to contact our legislative people that you've identified, and this is an excellent presentation, by the way, very dense, I appreciate it, but also to identify that addresses their moral, their sense of morality, what's right and wrong. But we also need to identify who is giving money to these candidates and contact them and see if they are in agreement, if they understand where their money is going. And that attacks or that approaches the other side of this equation of these legislators we have. They want to be reelected. And if their donors question what they're doing, where their money is going, they will be incentivized to also question the decisions that they're making. So not only contact the legislators, but contact the donor class.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Donald. I think it's a points well taken. If anybody has any, I don't really have anything to say in response. I mean, a lot of this money is our money. It's public money that we are focusing on. If anybody else has responses, please weigh in.
I think what I was hearing was to target the donors who donate to candidates. Is that what, am I understanding that right? I think one of the things here, though, is, I mean, the individuals who work for MEDC, for example, are all appointed. So these are not elected positions. But in terms of maybe the candidates for governor, for example, maybe there's some alignment with what you're saying there. Yeah, Bridget says, it makes sense to me as a potential strategy for specific legislators with budgetary power. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Donald. Okay, next on the screen, I see Monadel. Did I say that right?
Thank you. Am I on mute?
Yeah.
I want to start by saying this is an amazing research that you guys did, an amazing job in the presentation, and this is really, really great. And I'm sure it took a lot of work and a lot of efforts, a lot of hours to do that. And this is amazing. This is a really great start. I'm by no means we're from California. We're not here to tell you what to do, better. I mean, that what needs to be done. We have a similar campaign. We started it back in September when we came back from the conference about arms embargo, and it started with a handful of people, but now we just had a meeting, a community meeting, that we had like 400 people in the hall, and we were able to make sure that we approach the legislature in a different way, while we understand we don't want to make like a big enemies, but work with a friendly state representative, or like different city council with a non-binding resolution, meaning like a sense of the legislator that should prioritize grants to community literacy, disability services, emergency response, all these foreign weapons accelerators. The budget amendment for the next state budget earmarked at 650,000. That's the exact MIBA grant amount, and that's especially for those 4 programs. And I think why would this work? Because legislature loves to claim the credit for helping autism services, fire trucks, and they hate being tied to genocide funding, and we want to make sure that we expose that. I thought the slides in public records and hearing is very, very effective. You're bring blown up copies of these slides. I think it would be very effective in public meetings like that, and launched like a people's grant campaign, people's grant budget. Present the alternative. That's really, this is what we need as Michigan communities, as any other communities. And I thought, amplify through the social media. We will be willing to help, statewide, not only statewide, but also national-wide. We wanted to amplify your call and expose what MIBA stands for, and at this time. So in the bottom line is, we don't just want to expose them, but we have a positive, popular, vote-winning alternative that lead with that, and lead MIPA to defend sending money to Israel. We need to put them on the defense, while people are waiting for their community support and their community programs.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Aya,
thank you,
did you want to
Manadel.
respond?
Thank you, Manadel.
I think maybe Aya wants to respond to that comment.
Hey everyone, this is Aya with Engineers Against Apartheid. And just to go off Manada's comment, in terms of like when we started, really looking into MIBA as well, especially in Michigan in the work sector, many of us engineers, we're looking into a lot of technology that MIBA is bringing into Michigan, and especially Michigan being such a strategic area. Of course, we've seen that they're trying to build this quote unquote new world order in the Middle East, but it's also helping bolster the Israeli economy as well. So they're bringing a lot of that technology into Michigan, which Michigan is an exporter of tech for the whole of the United States. So it's not only impacting Michiganders itself; it's going to be exported, through vehicles, through other types of technology. MIBA talks about how they want to get involved in healthcare, in agriculture. They want to export Israeli technology. A lot of this stuff, that's most likely tested, in on Palestinians within Palestine. They're bringing that tech here. We're already seeing surveillance technology, Israeli surveillance technology in Michigan, and we anticipate that it's not going to stop here. A lot of the police forces are using Israeli technology, so it really is a concern. There's automotive technology, like EVs and whatnot, using Israeli technology. So it really is a concern, MIBA for the whole country itself to kind of put a stop to this. Not only to stop the Israeli economy from growing, in Palestine, but also to stop it from growing within the United States itself. So I definitely think it is a concern for everybody, especially because of the influence that Michigan has as an industrial state, within the USA. So, yeah, just wanted to add that input in there as well.
Thanks, Aya. I wanted to lift up just something that Manada said in relation to this idea of like a people's budget as an alternative. Like, what would the people's LDSI earmark budget be? And I think that's where this map that we created actually can play a big role. I mean, if folks can really see the all the projects that our communities desperately need funding for, and then back and advocate for the funding and inclusion of those projects within our state budget, that will ice MIBA out of receiving this $1 million. Okay. Are there any other questions? Or anyone else from steering, did you want to respond to anything that was said?
Stephen Friday had posted in the chat, how are we going to get labor on board with this? It's a great question. Part of our strategy with Michigan Divest, when we were working with as a pension, state pension retirement system, there were a lot of unions that represented pensioners, and it was a big part of our strategy to get some of them. We obtained an endorsement of about 4 unions, who represented thousands of people in the system. We're thinking about reaching out to those same unions. I mean, for example, the Dearborn Federation of Teachers. I mean, the difference there is, the union labor is not directly tied to the funds. But when unions support Palestine and speak on these issues, it's a good thing. And Stephen, if you or anybody else has ideas about how to involve labor, we are all ears, because it's definitely on our mind.
And just to add, when about we are going to expand. We are the core that this is the core 4 groups or 5 groups that worked on this, but this is not going to stop with us 4 or 5. We want to encompass many organizations, a variety, not just one similar, just a variety throughout Michigan, to help us with this campaign. This is just the beginning. This isn't the end or the be all. This is just the beginning. So we do want to pull in, all the different organizations that are not only back Michigan Divest through their Break the Bonds campaign, but also, as you're saying, I've heard from unions like the nursing union. I've heard from teachers unions, individuals who say they want to bring them along, because even though this isn't directly a union related issue, these LDSIs take away from their healthcare, their jobs, their communities, so they all are invested. There isn't anybody in Michigan that isn't invested in joining this. So we hope this will grow tremendously after this webinar today.
One more point about Stephen's point. Thank you, Jalal. The CEO of Corewell in 2023 went on, I believe, a trip to Israel sponsored by MIBA. Corewell was just organized by the Teamsters, and they've had a very big struggle with Corewell. So that's an idea that we're also thinking about.
All right, I'm noticing the time. We have about 3 minutes left. We have two raised hands. So let's let David, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, just quickly. Thank you. Excellent foundation for us workers in the field to build on. Wonderful research and so on. I'm just wondering if any of your research has uncovered some of the past projects that MIBA has funded that have led directly to munitions and to the destruction that we see in the West Bank and in Gaza and now in Lebanon. I remember during the anti-apartheid movement when we uncovered that Xerox was actually directly involved in the pass system of producing the passes that Africans were required to have, and that we discovered that in Detroit there was a company that was servicing and repairing military vehicles for the South Africans, that those very specifics of how the money had been used were very powerful in raising public ire at the system. So any of specific kinds of outcomes of past MIBA money would be helpful for us, I think.
I think I might want to respond to that. I know engineers, because part of that has done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, so I think one example that Rida covered during her explanation was Plasan. So that's Israeli weapons manufacturer that's in Grand Rapids at this moment. So what they actually do is they take, automotive chassis like Ford chassis and whatnot, and they retrofit those vehicles as Israeli military vehicles. So that's one example of one of those Israeli weapons manufacturers. And actually, another campaign that we're working on now with Engineers Against Apartheid is a kind of like a global campaign against FANUC Corporation. So it's a Japanese company, but they've opened an American headquarters in Oakland County. And they actually are looking to expand, and they have a request from the city council. They have a special meeting this Tuesday, actually, for expansion to build their facilities here. And we know they're involved with Elbit Systems in Israel aerospace industries. So, of course, we don't understand what the connection between MIBA and FANUC might be. We understand that MIBA is bringing business for Israel here. But of course, we're still trying to understand where their connection is there. But FANUC is another example of that as well, for building robots that help build components for the F-35 jets, as well as cluster munitions for Elbit Systems and Lockheed Martin as well. So those are continued campaigns that we have going on as well to target those companies specifically that we are working on. But of course, many smaller companies that we're still looking into.
Thanks, Aya. Nabil. Good.
Yes. Hi, guys. Just a very quick question. I asked, I don't know if anyone answered. You said there's a meeting on the 12th. I went to the link. Is it only Zoom? I don't see a physical, if there is one.
Answer this question in the chat.
I went to the link, like I said again, went down to the page and you click on it. There is no physical, unless I missed it.
So May 12th, the MEDC meeting it's the executive board meeting that's open to public. And you can make public comment either virtually or in person. In person, you have to be there right at 10 a.m. They open up the morning for public comments in the beginning.
Dalal, I'm asking, what is the place at? That's what I'm asking.
It is in Lansing. It's the MEDC building in Lansing. And if people can't make it there, then it's virtual.
And what is the address? I'm sorry, what is the address?
We'll send all this information
Yeah.
in a follow-up email to everyone who's on this call. And Nabil, I can also talk with you one-on-one.
That's fine. That's all. I just need the address. Okay.
Yeah, we'll send that out.
Yeah, it's on the slide with the information about attending the meeting. So we'll send these slides out to everybody who attended today.
Okay, perfect.
So
Thanks.
you can find that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm noting the time. It's already 2 minutes after. So I do want to thank you all so much for spending your evening with us. We know this was a lot of information. We know you're probably leaving this meeting very angry about how your public funds have been used, how tribal funds are being used to fuel Israeli apartheid and genocide, occupation, and regional war. So stay tuned for updates. Please sign the petition. Everyone will get a copy of these slides. Like I said, make sure to check the link tree that we have linked in the slides so you can send a letter, sign the petition, share the petition, and stay tuned for what comes next. We hope to see you all at the next MEDC board meeting on May 12th in Lansing or virtually. So make sure to be there. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Let's pack that boardroom on the 12th.
Yes, pack the room. Wear keffiyehs. Let's make them scared.
One last thanks to Zena, the person who is responsible for keeping the Zoom together. Has to be quiet and focused and makes all the